Determining heart attitudes. When we select leaders, we are to use biblical criteria that measure internal Christ-like qualities. Here's Gene.
1 Samuel 16, verse 1. The Lord said to Samuel, "How long are you going to mourn for Saul?" The last statement we read was that Samuel was really mourning over Saul's behavior. I mean, he was a faithful pastor, a faithful shepherd. He did not enjoy what he saw happening to this man. But God said, it's over. We got to move on. So how long are you going to mourn for Saul? Yes, I regret that I made him king, but let's move forward. Since I have rejected him as king over Israel, it's done, it's over. Fill your horn with oil and go. I'm sending you to Jesse of Bethlehem because I have selected a king from his sons. And so we now have a new chapter, as it were, in the replacement, ultimately, of Saul. Not immediately, but a definite decision that God had made. So we read on, verse 7, "But the Lord said to Samuel, do not look at his appearance or his stature, because I have rejected him. Man does not see what the Lord sees, for man sees what is visible, but the Lord sees the heart." So here we move now into this, as I said, new chapter in leadership in Israel. Look at verses 11 through 13. Samuel is being obedient. Samuel asked Jesse, he's now with Jesse there in Bethlehem, "Are these all the sons you have?" And the answer from Jesse, they're still the youngest. Of course, we know who that is. It's David. But right now, he's tending the sheep. Samuel told Jesse, "Send for him. We won't sit down to eat until he gets here." In other words, I'm on a mission. And so Jesse sent for him. He had beautiful eyes and a healthy, handsome appearance. Now again, God is not against a person with a comely appearance. David was a good-looking kid, but he was probably short of stature. He wasn't an image of a Saul who was head and shoulders above everybody. He's a good-looking kid, but he had a different heart. And then the Lord said, "Anoint him, for he is the one." So Samuel took the horn of oil, anointed him in the presence of his brothers. And I want you to just keep that in mind, that this was done in the presence of his other brothers. They saw him anointed. And the Spirit of the Lord took control of David from that day forward. And then Samuel set out and went to Ramah. And so here we have now an illustration of heart attitude, of looking at the inward qualities that reveal themselves in external qualities, not the opposite. Even in the Old Testament, we see an illustration of this. If you go back to Exodus, in the appointment of individuals that were to help Moses, they were looking for able men, God-fearing men, trustworthy, hating bribes. These are all internal qualities that reveal themselves in these external manifestations. And when we get into the New Testament, we see the same thing illustrated. For example, in Titus, for an overseer, for a pastor, as God's administrator, must be blameless. That is above reproach, good reputation. How do we know that? He's not arrogant. He's not hot-tempered, not addicted to wine, not a bully, not greedy for money. But on the positive side, hospitable, loving what is good, sensible, righteous, holy, self-controlled. And so the question is, how do the criteria for selecting spiritual leaders in the church in Paul's letters to Timothy, such as in 1 Timothy 3 and in Titus, the passage we just looked at, how do they help us evaluate a person's heart attitude? Well, just walk through those. For example, let me just repeat what we read in Titus. An overseer, as God's administrator, must be blameless. In other words, we're looking for a good reputation. But how do we find that good reputation? Well, first of all, not arrogant. Certainly, arrogance reveals an inner spirit of pride, of immaturity. This outward demonstration of pride and arrogance reveals the heart. Not hot-tempered. That is a reflection of anger, of hostility, of quick-temperedness. That was Saul's problem when he made that oath and created that difficult situation. It grew out of his hot-temperedness, his anger that was out of control. Not addicted to wine. In this case, Paul's talking about what we would call alcoholism. And it's common knowledge from alcoholics themselves, once they come to grips with that issue, that they will lie, that they are deceivers. They deceive themselves, they deceive others. And certainly when we see this kind of addiction, that is not a reflection of credibility, of trust, of integrity. Not a bully. We've all met them. And certainly that is not a reflection of maturity. The outward manifestation of doing that kind of thing towards other people is not a reflection of a sensitive heart. And not greedy for money, selfishness. All of this is a reflection of immaturity in a person's life, not a reflection of a heart that's following after God. And then, of course, Paul wraps it up by stating all of this positively. But hospitable, loving what is good, sensible, righteous, holy, self-controlled. And remember, the lesson is that God looks on the heart. That's the most important thing in his situation, in the selection particularly of leadership, as God views that particular situation. And Paul speaks to that here, but in the Old Testament, Saul is a visual illustration to all of Israel that it's the heart, not the external qualities, that God really is interested in terms of those who lead us and give direction to us.